Throughout history, ancient civilizations have played a crucial role in shaping human development, culture, governance, and economic systems. These societies laid the foundations for modern political structures, technological advancements, and cultural traditions. Africa, as one of the cradles of civilization, has been home to some of the most influential and powerful societies in history. Among them, ancient Egypt and the Mali Empire stand out as two of the most prominent civilizations that flourished in different periods and geographical regions. Despite their differences in time period, geographical location, and cultural development, ancient Egypt and the Mali Empire share several key similarities. Both civilizations established sophisticated governance systems, thrived on trade, and left lasting legacies that influenced not only Africa, but the world at large. However, their unique environmental conditions, religious practices, and political structures also distinguish them from each other. This essay will explore and compare these two great African civilizations in terms of geography, governance, economy, religion, cultural achievements, and their lasting impact on history. Ancient Egypt developed along the banks of the Nile River, often referred to as the Gift of the Nile by the Greek historian Herodotus. The river provided a fertile agricultural belt in an otherwise arid desert region, allowing Egypt to develop a stable and prosperous agrarian society. The annual flooding of the Nile deposited nutrient-rich silt on the land, enabling the cultivation of crops such as wheat and barley. This reliable food production supported a growing population and facilitated the rise of a centralized state. Beyond agriculture, the Nile River served as a natural highway for trade and communication. Egyptian merchants traded with neighboring Nubia, the Levant, and even Mesopotamia, exchanging goods such as papyrus, gold, and linen. The river also provided protection against invasions, as Egypt was surrounded by vast deserts that acted as natural barriers against hostile forces. These environmental conditions allowed Egypt to develop a stable political structure and a civilization that endured for millennia. In contrast, the Mali Empire thrived in the savanna region of West Africa, with the Niger River playing a vital role in its development. Unlike the predictable flooding of the Nile, the Niger River's extensive network of tributaries and wetlands provided a consistent source of water for agriculture and trade. The fertile lands around the river supported the cultivation of millet, rice, and other staple crops, sustaining a large population. Mali's geographic advantage lay in its control of the trans-Saharan trade routes, which connected West Africa to North Africa and the Mediterranean. The empire's wealth was built on the trade of gold and salt, two of the most valuable commodities of the time. Gold mined from the southern regions of Mali was transported across the Sahara to be exchanged for salt, which was essential for preserving food in the hot climate. Moreover, Mali's open savanna landscape allowed for easier movement of people, goods, and armies compared to the more isolated environment of Egypt. This accessibility contributed to Mali's role as a cultural and economic hub, attracting merchants, scholars, and travelers from across Africa and beyond. The geography of Egypt and Mali profoundly influenced their economic and political structures. While Egypt's dependence on the Nile fostered a highly centralized and bureaucratic state under the rule of the pharaohs, Mali's control of trade routes and vast wealth allowed for a more decentralized form of governance, with regional rulers and local chiefs playing significant roles. Furthermore, the environmental conditions shaped the architectural and cultural expressions of these civilizations. Egypt's desert landscape led to the construction of monumental stone structures such as pyramids and temples, which have withstood the test of time. Meanwhile, Mali's adobe-based architecture, exemplified by the Great Mosque of Djenné, reflected the availability of materials suited for a savanna climate. Ancient Egypt was one of the world's earliest examples of a centralized monarchy. The pharaoh was not just a political leader, but was also considered a god on earth, ensuring the unity and stability of the state. Egyptian society revolved around a hierarchical system, where the pharaoh had absolute power, and was supported by a complex bureaucracy of viziers, priests, and officials. Egypt's governance was structured around dynasties, with power passed from one ruler to the next in a hereditary system. The pharaoh controlled taxation, military campaigns, religious institutions, and legal matters. This centralized system enabled Egypt to undertake massive architectural projects, such as the pyramids and temples, which served both as religious centers and as symbols of state power. However, the highly centralized nature of Egypt's government also meant that periods of weak leadership or internal strife often led to political instability, as seen during the intermediate periods. The reliance on a divine ruler meant that legitimacy depended on maintaining religious and political control, making governance fragile in times of external invasion or economic decline. In contrast, the Mali Empire had a more flexible and decentralized system of governance. The empire was ruled by a Mansa, a title that signified supreme authority, with the most famous being Mansa Musa. Unlike Egypt's pharaohs, Mali's rulers were not considered gods, but were seen as powerful leaders with religious significance, especially after Islam became a dominant influence. While the Mansa held significant power, local governance was largely managed by regional chiefs and local kings. This decentralized structure allowed Mali to effectively govern a vast empire spanning different ethnic groups and cultures. Regional rulers were given autonomy as long as they paid tribute to the central government and remained loyal to the Mansa. Mali's political system was strengthened by its ability to integrate Islamic governance principles with traditional African political structures. The empire's legal and administrative frameworks were influenced by Islamic scholars, particularly during Mansa Musa's reign when Timbuktu became a center for Islamic learning. While both Egypt and Mali maintained monarchies, their systems of governance had significant differences in centralization, religious authority, and administrative flexibility. Egypt's pharaohs had divine legitimacy and exercised strict centralized control, whereas Mali's Mansas ruled through a mix of centralized authority and regional governance. Egypt's system allowed for massive state projects, but was vulnerable to weak rulers. Mali's decentralized system made it more adaptable to regional changes, but relied heavily on trade wealth for stability. The foundation of Egypt's economy was its highly productive agricultural system, made possible by the fertile lands along the Nile River. The annual flooding of the Nile deposited rich silt, allowing for the cultivation of staple crops such as wheat, barley, and flax. The surplus of agricultural production not only sustained the local population, but also provided a stable food supply for trade and taxation. Trade played a crucial role in Egypt's economic expansion. Egyptian merchants engaged in extensive trade with neighboring regions, including Nubia, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. Key exports included papyrus, gold, linen, and precious stones, while imports included cedar wood from Lebanon, copper from Sinai, and incense from Punt. The construction of large-scale infrastructure, such as granaries, canals, and roads, further facilitated economic prosperity. Egypt's wealth enabled it to build monumental structures, finance military campaigns, and sustain a highly organized bureaucracy. However, its economic dependence on the Nile made it vulnerable to droughts and shifts in trade routes, which contributed to periods of decline. Mali's economy was built on its abundant natural resources, particularly gold and salt. The empire controlled some of the richest gold mines in West Africa, making it one of the wealthiest civilizations of its time. Gold was in high demand in North Africa and Europe, where it was used for coinage and luxury goods. Salt, on the other hand, was essential for preserving food and maintaining health, making it a valuable commodity traded across the Sahara. Mali's strategic location allowed it to dominate the trans-Saharan trade routes. Caravans of merchants transported gold, salt, ivory, and slaves across the desert, linking West Africa to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern markets. Cities like Timbuktu and Gao became bustling trade hubs, attracting scholars, merchants, and travelers from across the Islamic world. Under Mansa Musa, Mali's economic influence reached its peak. His famous pilgrimage to Mecca showcased the empire's immense wealth as he distributed gold lavishly along his journey. This economic prosperity allowed Mali to invest in education, religious institutions, and infrastructure, strengthening its position as a cultural and economic powerhouse. While both Egypt and Mali were wealthy civilizations, their economies were shaped by different factors. Egypt's wealth was based on agricultural stability and international trade, allowing for large-scale state projects and military expansions. Mali, on the other hand, relied on its control of gold and salt trade, which connected it to global markets and Islamic commerce. Both civilizations used their wealth to fund monumental projects, Egypt with its pyramids and temples, and Mali with its mosques and universities. However, their economic vulnerabilities differed. Egypt was susceptible to fluctuations in the Nile's flooding, while Mali depended on maintaining trade dominance over the Sahara. Ancient Egyptian religion was deeply polytheistic, with a pantheon of gods governing various aspects of life. Deities like Ra, the sun god, Osiris, god of the afterlife, and Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood, were central figures in religious practice. Temples, statues, and daily rituals ensured divine favor, and the pharaoh himself was considered a god-king, bridging the mortal world with the divine. Religious architecture, such as pyramids and temples, played a vital role in Egyptian culture. Pyramids were not only royal tombs, but also spiritual monuments, ensuring the deceased ruler's journey to the afterlife. The practice of mummification, elaborate burial rituals, and the Book of the Dead all reflected the Egyptians' strong belief in the afterlife and cosmic order, Ma'at. Before the spread of Islam, the Mali Empire practiced animism, where spirits were believed to inhabit natural objects, ancestors were venerated, and rituals were performed to maintain harmony. With the introduction of Islam in the 11th century, religious practices gradually shifted. By the reign of Mansa Musa in the 14th century, Mali had become a predominantly Islamic state. Islam influenced Mali's governance, legal system, and education. Islamic scholars and clerics played advisory roles in the court, and Islamic law, Sharia, began shaping social norms. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca, Hajj, in 1324 symbolized the deep integration of Islam into Malian society. Despite this, indigenous spiritual traditions persisted, particularly in rural areas where ancestral worship and animistic practices remained significant. While Egypt and Mali had different religious foundations, both civilizations integrated spirituality into governance. Egyptian rulers derived their legitimacy from their divine status, while Malian rulers used Islam to consolidate power and gain international recognition. Religious institutions in both societies played essential roles in education, law, and administration, shaping their historical legacies. Egypt is renowned for its monumental architecture, including pyramids, temples, and statues that showcased the civilization's artistic and engineering prowess. Hieroglyphic writing allowed for the recording of history, religious texts, and administrative documents, ensuring the preservation of Egyptian culture for millennia. Egyptian advancements in mathematics, medicine, and astronomy were unparalleled in the ancient world. Their understanding of geometry enabled the construction of massive stone structures, while their medical practices influenced later Greek and Roman medicine. Mali's cultural contributions were centered around education, oral traditions, and music. Timbuktu emerged as a leading intellectual hub, home to renowned libraries and universities such as Sankore. Scholars from across Africa and the Middle East traveled to Mali to study theology, astronomy, and law. Unlike Egypt's reliance on written texts, Mali preserved much of its history and culture through oral traditions. Griots, or traditional storytellers, played a vital role in maintaining historical records and educating society. Music and poetry were integral to Malian culture, serving as means of storytelling and social commentary. Egypt and Mali both contributed significantly to global knowledge and cultural development. Egypt's architectural and scientific achievements influenced later civilizations, while Mali's centers of learning fostered intellectual exchange between Africa and the Islamic world. Despite their different artistic mediums, Egyptian hieroglyphs and Malian oral traditions, both civilizations ensured their legacies endured. Egypt's military was essential for securing borders, expanding territory, and maintaining internal order. The use of chariots, advanced archery, and disciplined infantry allowed Egypt to conduct successful campaigns in Nubia and the Levant. The New Kingdom period, c. 1550 to 1070 BCE, saw Egypt reach its greatest territorial extent, with pharaohs like Thutmose III leading conquests that extended Egyptian influence deep into the Near East. Despite its military prowess, Egypt faced challenges from foreign invaders, including the Hyksos, Assyrians, and Persians. Defensive strategies, such as fortifications along the Nile and alliances with neighboring states, were employed to safeguard the kingdom. Mali's military successes were largely attributed to its strong leadership and strategic alliances. Under Sundiata Keita, Mali expanded by defeating the Soso kingdom and consolidating control over the gold trade routes. Later, Mansa Musa extended Mali's influence through diplomacy and military campaigns, securing trade networks that contributed to the empire's wealth. Unlike Egypt's centralized standing army, Mali's military relied on regional forces and cavalry units. The empire's expansion was often achieved through a combination of warfare and political alliances, allowing for a relatively stable rule over a vast territory. While Egypt and Mali had different military structures, both relied on technological advancements and strategic planning. Egypt's chariot warfare and fortified defenses reflected its need for territorial control, while Mali's cavalry-based forces and diplomatic strategies enabled it to dominate West Africa's trade networks. Both civilizations understood that military power was essential for economic and political stability, ensuring their dominance for centuries. Ancient Egypt's influence is evident in multiple domains, from architecture and governance to religion and science. The construction of monumental structures such as the pyramids and the Sphinx set standards for engineering and architectural ingenuity. Hieroglyphic writing contributed to the development of early literacy and record-keeping, influencing later writing systems. Egyptian governance, with its centralized administration under the pharaoh, provided a model for later empires, demonstrating the effectiveness of a structured bureaucracy. Religious concepts from Egypt, including ideas of an afterlife and divine kingship, influenced subsequent civilizations, including Greek, Roman, and later Abrahamic traditions. Egypt's medical knowledge, mathematical advancements, and astronomical observations laid the groundwork for future scientific progress. The civilization's artistic and cultural expressions remain subjects of study and admiration, with museums around the world preserving Egyptian artifacts as part of humanity's shared heritage. The Mali Empire's influence is particularly notable in African history, Islamic scholarship, and global trade. As one of the wealthiest empires of its time, Mali played a crucial role in the trans-Saharan trade, connecting Africa to the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. The empire's wealth and commerce helped integrate African economies into global networks. Mali's most profound impact was on Islamic scholarship. Cities like Timbuktu became centers of learning, attracting scholars from different regions. The famous Sankore University and its libraries preserved knowledge in fields such as astronomy, medicine, and theology, fostering intellectual exchange between Africa and the broader Islamic world. Both Egypt and Mali continue to influence contemporary societies. Egypt's ancient structures attract millions of visitors annually, sustaining its tourism industry and contributing to national identity. Egyptian symbols, mythology, and artistic styles inspire modern literature, film, and architecture. Both civilizations played crucial roles in shaping African history and influencing global developments. Egypt's contributions to governance, science, and engineering had far-reaching effects on subsequent empires and cultures. Meanwhile, Mali's integration into the Islamic world fostered cross-cultural exchanges and economic growth, solidifying West Africa's place in global trade networks. Despite their differences, ancient Egypt and the Mali Empire exemplify Africa's rich and diverse history. Their innovations in governance, economy, religion, and culture continue to be studied and admired worldwide. Understanding their achievements not only honors the past, but also provides valuable insights into the historical interconnectedness of civilizations. By preserving their legacies, we ensure that future generations appreciate Africa's foundational role in global history.